Dorothy, domestic education financing is central to attaining the SDG 4. And also, EduWatch, we have been doing quite a lot to ensure government commits more resources to education, especially basic education. And this year, in collaboration with Ashiyie, EduWatch carried out case study in 2 municipalities, AdMA Metro and Adenta. So my duty is to present the findings of this particular research work. So I'll go straight to that. So as mentioned, this is a collaboration with Ashiyie. We received their support to do this particular work. And the work is guided by the following objectives: to examine the existing tax architecture for education financing, both at the national level and the local level. Also, guided by analyzing the implication of the reforms on education financing. Also, to assess the existing mechanism for citizens' accountability on education financing and its effectiveness. So the mechanisms that are existing for citizens to demand accountability from duty bearers on education service delivery, and how effective these mechanisms are. And finally, make recommendations for improved financing at both the national level and the local level. We carried out a study in 2 municipalities, as I mentioned, Adenta and AdMA Metro. We collected data by doing literature review and also focus group discussion, and the focus group discussion actually included the economic units at the various assemblies. By the economic units, we talk about traders, transport officers, and tenants. They form, or some of the people that form the economic units. We also had focus group with revenue mobilization officers at the 2 municipalities. And then also education officers were part of the discussion, as well as education CSOs. At the national level, we had key informant interview with members of Parliamentary Select Committee on Education, and then also some representative of Ghana Revenue Authority and Ministry of Education, also Ministry of Finance. Get Fan as well was part of the person's interview as part of the key informant interviews, among others. Straight to the findings. On source of education financing at the local level, we identify 4 main sources for education financing. The internally generated fund is one of them, and they include building permits that the assemblies collect, traders licensing, business operating, building permits, I mentioned that, and fees and fines. So if somebody has filed with the law, the local government's law, they are also fined. Such money goes to the local assembly. Another source is the District Assembly Common Fund, which is created constitutionally, and the Constitution requires that percentage, not less than 5% of the government revenue, is committed to the District Assembly Common Fund. So it's also a source for financing education at the local level. The Responsiveness Factor Grant is another source, and that's actually a grant given to districts that are doing well on some selected indicators, 3 main indicators. Per their performance, they are given extra grants. And then the last one is the MP's Common Fund, which is actually 3% of the District Assembly Common Fund. All right, let's look at the performance in revenue collection disaggregated along the various sources between 2021 and 2022. AdMA Metro first. AdMA Metro has recorded improvement. In fact, all of them have recorded improvements along the various sources, except for Adenta, which in 2022 has recorded a decline. In 2022, revenue improved by 15% from the 2021 revenue, That's from 23 million to 26 million, 2021 to 2022. That's the IGF. On the DASCF, it increased by 12% from 1.7 million to 1.9 million. The responsiveness factor grant also increased by 15% from 1 million to 1.5 million. And the MP Common Fund also increased by 20%, 500,000 to 602,000. In total, the assembly grant for Tema Metro in total increased from 26 million in 2021 to 29.6 million in 2022. That represents 13% increment. Looking at Adenta, Adenta also on the IGF, they recorded an improvement from 12 million to 14.6 million, representing 23%. And that's along the IGF. And then the DACF, that's where they recorded a decline, a significant one, of course, 67% decline from 2.6 million to 873,000. We don't have data on their responsiveness factor grant for the 2 years. But for the MP Common Fund, they've also recorded an improvement, 10% improvement, 321,000 to 354,000. In total, their revenue in 2021 was 14.9 million, increased by 25%. That is representing 18.8 million. So this is the performance between 2021 and 2022 between the two municipalities. Also, we noticed that on average, the municipality, they commit 10% of their revenue to education, 10% of their total revenue goes to education, and the priority areas are construction of schools, provision of furniture, provision of teaching and learning resources. They also support mock examination and as well provide scholarship for needy students at the local level. Also, the Constitution, as I mentioned, requires that not less than 5% of government revenue is committed to the District Assembly Common Fund, but we noticed that what they have been receiving is less than the constitutional requirements of not less than, or at least 5%. There's also delayed dependence of the Common Fund, meaning that the assemblies will have to rely largely on their IGF. Since the Common Fund delays, most of the activities that they run within a fiscal year depends on the IGF or comes from the IGF. The IGF constitutes about 80% of their total revenue collection. So out of the 4 sources, the IGF constitutes about 80% of their total revenue. Then also about 20% of the IGF is used for social services, largely on health and education. And as I mentioned, out of this 20%, 10% goes to education. All right, at the national level, having looked at what is happening at the local level using these 2 municipalities as cases. At the national level, these are the main sources of education financing. We have 5 main sources. Government of Ghana, the annual budget funding amount, which is revenue from the oil, and then also the GET Fund, largely for financing infrastructure, from donor partners, and then IGF, mainly money generated by the institutions. And when we look at the schools, it will mainly be the tertiary institutions because basic education, they do not collect money, and as well as senior high schools or secondary schools. So the IGF mainly is from the tertiary institutions. All right. On nominal level, education financing, the amount committed has been increasing, but when we strike it in terms of percentage, total revenue committed to education, in terms of percentage to GDP, and then also percentage to government annual revenue, we have been seeing some slight decline. Internationally, our commitment is to do at least 4% of GDP, and then at the upper threshold, 6% of GDP. And then when it comes to the annual revenue or government revenue for a year, the percentage should be at least 15%, and then the upper threshold should be 20%. And as we can see on the slide, on average, we've been doing from 2018 to 2022, we've been doing on average approximately 4% of GDP. It is in 2023 that we have seen a decline, which is below the international recommended least benchmark, 3.1%. So 2023 is the year we have seen the least allocation to education. I must mention that we've seen 8% allocation to education before in 2012. So we can imagine from 2012, 8% all the way to 3% in 2023. You can see what is happening to resources being allocated to education. In terms of the annual revenue percentage being allocated, this year too, we fall greatly below the least threshold, the 15% at least that we're supposed to do. We are doing 13%. We're doing 19% in 2018, increased slightly to 21% approximately in 2019, and falls to 18%, falls again to 15% in 2021, and again falls slightly to 15.03% in 2022, and all the way to 13.1% in 2023. So this is how the resources at the national level is performing in terms of GDP allocation and total government revenue allocation. We have to understand that Ghana's GDP is increasing. We noticed that from 2018, GDP was 300 million Ghana cedis, and in 2023, it is 800 million Ghana cedis. That's more than double. But while GDP is doubling, we've seen revenue being committed to education between these 2 years, 2018 and 2023, declining from 3.7% to 3.1%. The 13% allocation in the 2023 budget to education is one of the lowest, as I've mentioned, below the international recommended threshold. And also, there's further cut in basic education goods and service budget. If you take the 2023 budget and look at the goods and services area, just the goods and services, the expenditure for education is expended in 3 ways: on goods and services, on salary and compensations, and on capital expenditure. When you take the goods and services area, where if you want to analyze government investment in quality, education quality, and we look at that budget line, at the basic education level, from 2022 to 2023, we've seen a significant decline by 40%. And then the GET Fund administrator mentioned that GET Fund has been capped, and that has posed a financial constraint on them. Given these two, it becomes so difficult for more investments to be made to education to improve accommodation, access to schools that will address the out of school number that we have in the country. We have about 1.4 million children that are out of school, with about 1 million never been to school before. Government, the past 5 years, has been embarking on several tax reforms, which I believe we are much aware of. At the local level, they are also be taking some initiative to improve their revenue. When we take Tema Metro, for instance, they have identified the night economy. That's business that operates in the night. We know some businesses, they actually do well or boom during the night. So they have noticed that it is one of the areas that they have been taxed so well. So they have mapped that particular economy to begin introducing tax at that level so that their revenue can be improved. That Metro also initiated a reform in the tax collection strategy by mapping key economic units within the night market, right? Tax reform contributed to an increase in IGF from 23 million in 2021 to 27 million, as we've seen in the previous chart. that they have also done well in terms of IGF, which actually contributes about 80% of their total revenue. At the national level, we are much aware of some of the tax reforms that have been happening. We are much aware of the sin tax, or the Excise Duty Amendment Act 2023, which is to increase tax on harmful products like cigarettes. Is one of the reforms that's happening at the national level. We are much aware of the e-levy that was also introduced. VAT has also been increased from 12.5% to 15%. These are some of the tax reforms that have happened since the last 5 years. GET fund has also been capped alongside other 13 statutory funds, including the District Assembly Common Fund, through the AdMA Funds Capping and Realignment Act. That was done in 2017 at 947, which means that the total revenue accrued to GET fund, they won't get all the money that are supposed to be, that they only get some percentage. All right. Given this, with the capping of GET fund and also the capping of the District Assembly Common Fund, it becomes so difficult to make more investment in construction of school or supplying of furniture to school. If you follow us closely, I've noticed that we did a scoping and identified that the debt deficit in school at the basic level is about 2.3 million. All right. Challenges in revenue mobilization at the local level, our focus group engagement, and then also the key informant interviews reveal the following: weak data capturing system and weak working database to keep track of the payments and defaulters. So the data system is weak. Some of them are not working well, which they recognize, and that requires improvement. Lack of structured payment modalities and unrealistic tax attribution for middle to low income earning units as compared to high income earning units. So the low income unit is not well structured. We know mostly they fall within the informal economic sector, so they have not been well mapped. There's also weak enforcement of sanctions for non-compliance. Yes, at the municipality levels that we had engagement at, they said, of course, some people default in paying their taxes, but of course, enforcement of sanctions is very low. Some people are let to go. Apathy due to lack of information, transparency, and accountability in the management of taxes. Yes, though a lot of avenues exist for citizens to be aware of taxes that are being introduced at the local level, they are not being utilized well. So most residents are not aware of some of the taxes that are introduced at the local level. And then also there's lack of transparency on how the monies are being used. On accountability, we also noticed that citizens' engagement to demand accountability on the use of their revenue was non-existent, woefully non-existent, or very low. There's also large informal sector, which is not well mapped and also taxed. These are some of the weaknesses or the challenges in revenue mobilization at the local level. All right, let's focus on Adenta municipality. The implication of inadequate revenue on education delivery, especially basic education, probably one of course. If you look at the EMIS data, there are about 91% of schools in Adenta that are private schools. It means just 9% are public school. Adenta has an average class size of 65 at the primary level and then 60 at the JHS level. Ideally, at the GSS level, it should be doing around 30, and then at the primary level, it should be doing around 35. But we can just see the data, more than double. All right, there are some cases, exceptional cases of some class sizes being up to 80. You are likely to see that in the municipality. Between 2018 and 2021, 4 years of capping of the capping earmark fund, The number of kindergartens has increased by only 1, with primary schools increased by only 2. When it happens like this, the residents have no option than to send their wards to private schools. During the same period, the percentage of basic school people without desks increased from 10% to 20%. Basic education students without desks, as at 2021 in the municipality, Adenta municipality, is 20%. There has also emerged classroom under trees. We have videos of classrooms that are existing under trees, and when it is raining, and they have to find their ways under the corridors of existing schools. Get Fund and other basic education projects for communities like Ashiyie and Ajigano have stalled. The Get Fund administrator acknowledged that they are aware of some of these stalled projects. So these are picture evidence of stalled projects and also student learning under tree in Adenta community. All right, let's move on. AdMA Metro, what are the cases there? About 62% of schools over there are private school, meaning about 38% are just public school. Currently, some infrastructure projects have also stalled in that particular municipality, with other lacking critical development due to limited fund. The Assembly's plan to provide a facelift to schools such as AdMA Community 7, number 1 basic school, could not materialize due to limited DACF inflow. About 10% of pupils lack desks in that particular community compared to 20% in Adenta. Prior to the capping of the DACF, AdMA Metro significantly and periodically supported basic school with infrastructure. So they were doing that prior to the capping of the common fund. But since the introduction of the common fund, it becomes so difficult for them to continue with such initiatives. All right, these are some of the pictures from AdMA Metro about store projects. Let's look at citizens' engagement at the local level in demanding accountability. If you look at the Constitution, it provides avenue for citizens to engage at the local level, Chapter 20 of the 1992 Constitution. And the same way, the Local Government Act also provides that the local assemblies should make room for citizens to engage at local level governance. And these are some of the provisions. Town hall meetings. The assemblies were to organize town hall meetings where residents can come for them to have discussion on whatever topics they want to as far as development is concerned. There's also budget determination forums where citizens are called upon to make their input into budget preparation, which will be onward submitted to national. Also publicity. The assemblies also use publicity to announce on some of the projects or initiatives that they engage in, especially websites at the Adenta municipality. They have websites. We do not notice that at AdMA Metro. Citizens or residents also have the opportunity to walk in to make inquiries about anything concerning development and revenue usage in the municipalities. There was also quarterly briefing with the coordinating directorate that was noted at AdMA Metro. General Assembly meetings, annual one, of course, so once in a year they call General Assembly where they rent accounts and also brief residents about developmental programs that are ongoing in the municipalities. Also subcommittees meetings after the General Assembly committee meetings, and then also one that we haven't captured here, they also meet economic units. For instance, they can decide to meet the landlords and ladies in their municipalities to have discussions. The citizens also contribute towards education service delivery, but mainly their delivery or their participation is about basic repair of infrastructure in the school, also providing libraries, ICT laboratories, or in some of the instances, financing of school examination. So citizens' engagement are mainly along this line. The concern mainly is about citizens' engagement in demanding local level accountability. We've seen that missing, although they participate in terms of providing some economic support towards education service delivery. In terms of their participation in demanding accountability, that is largely missing. So there was no indication of CSO involvement in advocating improvement in quality education. No, we didn't notice that. But I believe that while the residents are paying their taxes or their levies, it's very important that we demand accountability in the usage of this money. And the CSOs have critical roles to play. But sadly, their works are largely along the side of direct interventions like provision of school infrastructure, as mentioned earlier, supporting examination, but demanding accountability on how this money are being used from the local authorities. That one is largely missing. Local level CSOs engaged were not involved in campaigns to demand government action on the delayed capitation grant, which we also know very well that capitation grant is in arrears, but there was lack of activism on the part of CSO on that at the local level, textbook unavailability, and other critical issues that are bedeviling basic education at the local level. Recommendations. On the part of increasing citizens' participation, 1, local authorities must increase citizens' awareness on all public engagement activity, including budget and tax hearing, to enhance participation and accountability. 2, local authorities must intensify public education on existing taxes, their use, and the need to pay them. This will help increase participation in the payment of taxes. 3, local authorities must take legal actions against defaulters. This will serve as deterrent to defaulting citizens and encourage tax compliance. 4, local authorities should digitize revenue collection to improve collection and accountability. 5, local authorities should expand revenue mobilization scope to include uncaptured economic units, as we noticed that Metro is doing. The night market that they are doing, is very important that they expand that to capture more of these entities in the revenue database. The local government service must revise the reporting system for local assemblies to disaggregate sectoral disbursement and expenditure. This recommendation is so because we're trying to see directly what percentage of revenue from the assembly, from the different sources or aggregated, what percentage directly goes to education. We understand that they do not disaggregate their data along sector base, so our work was largely based on estimates on some of the calculations we did to estimate the 10%. So it's very important that their data is well disaggregated along the various sectors, health, infrastructure, or area of education. That will help to know the actual budget at the district assembly level that goes into education. All right, next. The Adenta Municipal Assembly should map out corporate organizations and NGOs in the municipality, develop and implement corporate sector partnership strategy to mobilize support for public basic education. It's very important that we identify the various corporate organizations. They are there, but their involvement as far as their corporate works are concerned, little they do about education. We are sure if the assemblies are deliberate about identifying these corporate entities and having a strategy to see how they can commit socially to education, that will improve the delivery of education at the local level. All right, policy level actions. The Ministry of Finance must uncap the GET Fund and the District Assembly Common Fund to free resources for completing stalled GET Fund projects in basic and senior high schools. The Ministry of Finance must speed up the operationalization of the exemption law, which in 2022 September, as last year, was assented to by the President. It's very important that this is operationalized. The Ministry of Finance must allocate the constitutionally approved share of the Common Fund to the District Assembly Common Fund. We know that that is supposed not at least 5% of the total revenue. the finance minister must do so well to commit these resources to the district assembly common fund. The Ministry of Finance must disburse all ABFA arrears on the district assembly common fund to enable the financing of relevant socio-economic interventions. Parliament must strengthen its oversight on the Ministry of Finance in the allocation and disbursement of the DACF and the GET fund. Ministry of Education must allocate at least 20% of GET fund to basic school infrastructure in 2024. Improving access, local government must work with corporate agencies directly, which I mentioned. The networking and advocacy skills of district PTA must be strengthened to represent and advocate on behalf of school level PTAs at the district level. So PTA in the various schools can form an alliance so that it gives them the stronger force to be able to demand accountability from district education directorate and also from the assemblies. Community-based CSO's capacity in advocacy must be enhanced. Very important, because at times it is weak capacity on their part. That's why they are unable to demand accountability. It's very important that their capacity is enhanced. Stronger participation should be developed between CSOs, schools, and various assemblies to continuously mount pressure on government to prioritize investment in public basic education. 5. Metropolitan municipal district education offices must create annual program and financial review platform to enable CSOs and PTAs participate in policy review at the local level. 6. District education directors should create annual performance review platform for multi-stakeholder engagement. We notice that at the district assembly level, there's no dedicated platform for education engagement. It's very important that such platforms are also created. Next. All right. Thank you so much for your attention.